Hi. I understood my name, Instagram, and California. So I think I'm supposed to be here. So yeah, we're here to talk about YouTube. What's it gonna load? Yay. So the start of the beginning. So I wanted to give you a very brief history of YouTube. So it was founded in 2005 by Chad Hurley, Steve Chen, Jawad Karim. And it was originally launched as a video dating website. So you can see here, you can just select what sex you are and who you want to look for and who you want to date. And the first video that was uploaded was by one of the co-founders, and it was entitled Me at the Zoo. And here in 2005, there was a lot of change. So the original site launched, I think, in April, very early in the spring. And over the course of that year, the homepage changed quite dramatically. In 2006, it was acquired by Google for a lot of money. 2007, we saw the launch of the original iPhone. And as Apple does, they tend to own the entire infrastructure. So they did not allow Maps, which was Google Maps, or YouTube to design our own products. They designed them for us and gave us that app icon, which I don't know why. 2007 came, some other changes. I also should have mentioned, these are going to be very low res because it's all the way back in 2007 when everything was 72 DPI. 2009, homepage. I'm just going to go through these really quickly. 2010, 2011. 2012, we launched our first app. Apple allowed us to design our own app, and so this is the app experience from that time. 2014, some more changes, and finally 2015. So just giving you a quick progression of the website. So 2015 is when I joined. I had been at Google for 3.5 years prior. My team had just launched material design, and I was looking for another challenge. And I came to YouTube. And our challenge at YouTube was to look at building a branded UI system like material design. Because material design did not work for our video platform because the core principles of material design are paper and ink as a metaphor for all of the UI. And we thought that that didn't make a lot of sense for video platform. And as we were designing for that platform, we saw a lot of broken elements, and it just didn't solve a lot of the problems that we uniquely had compared to other Google products. In that process, we're looking at building a branded system. So we wanted to look and see what brand tools we had. First thing we saw was this is the original logo. And I just want to give you a brief history of this logo as well. It was designed by Chad Hurley, one of the co-founders. And he told us when talking to us that he really liked the As Seen on TV logo, which is a brand that you can purchase products in the United States. It's based off of this, which is the TV Guide, which if you grew up in the United States from like the 50s through my childhood, this was every week showed up at your house to tell you what was on television to watch. He also told us that he rode the cow train to work every day as his commuter train from San Francisco to San Bruno. So you see those two logos, and there you go. So when I arrived, this is where the logo was at. It had been flattened. But there was a really big nagging problem. We actually had two logos. And there was no rhyme or reason as to why we used one or the other. There were no specs or guidance as to when to use one or the other. We looked at color. We had the idea of red. We didn't have a red. We had an idea of red, a potential for what red could be. Even in our fav icons, when you went through different YouTube websites, each one is different. So if you're on a creator tool, if you're on a marketing page, if you're on the YouTube homepage, there was no consistency there in that icon as well. This lack of guidance led to this. I don't even know how to describe it. So it's a lack of hierarchy or just guidance on how to create basic logos for events, for partnerships, for other products. My personal favorite being this one, sorry, in the bottom right corner, that says basically it's using both logos. So you have it basically saying YouTube Music, YouTube Awards, which is lovely. So as we were trying to organize this and try to see what was the landscape, and so if you try to bucket these, even there it's not really clear between apps and products, channels, events, and user tools and creator tools, etc. So these were a lot of just visual design big problems. The other thing with YouTube is numbers. We have 1 billion hours of video are watched on YouTube every single day. So in 24 hours, 1 billion hours of videos watched. We are in 88 countries and can be accessed in 76 different languages. YouTube on mobile alone reaches more 18 to 34-year-olds in the US than any TV network. Over 1 billion users, which amounts to almost 1/3 of the internet. So there's a huge sense of scale when designing and making anything for YouTube. So it has to work here. It has to work here, 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 and here. It has to work on every device imaginable. The other problem we have with that is we have to work with a product that was not only for desktop, but for iOS, Android, Nintendo, PlayStation, the handheld PlayStation, the handheld Nintendo system, Microsoft, Xbox, Samsung TVs that come pre-installed with YouTube, Apple TV, Amazon, et cetera, et cetera. Now the problem with this is we don't control our infrastructure or where we live on these platforms. They do. So they have platform guidelines that we have to follow or fudge a little. The other thing is when I joined, YouTube went from just being YouTube and having a desktop destination and a mobile app to being a poly brand. We launched YouTube Music, YouTube Kids, YouTube Gaming, YouTube Go, and YouTube TV. That's when we decided to kick off this project. It was no longer about building a branded UI system. We are going to continue to do that, but we also had to kick off another project just looking at brand and brand assets. So we call this project Project Ringo. And we realized that my design team, even though there's some fantastic designers on that team, interaction, motion, and graphic designers, we needed help. There was no way we could do a branded UI system and look at the entire brand and deal with all the complexity of these problems ourselves. So step in Saffron. We briefed them. We needed brand strategy. We needed that. Brand architecture. We needed that. Brand design. We definitely need that. So now I'm going to hand it off to Gabor.
Thanks, Chris. Hello. Good. When our colleagues before explained how excited they were when they won this football job, this was a bit similar with us. But we got a bit of vertigo because probably this is the biggest brand we've ever worked for, and we were overwhelmed by the responsibility of doing this, and we didn't even know where to start. So the interesting thing was, starting from the beginning, where actually Chris started the story, where the logo comes from. You know, no design thinking behind, no strategy, nothing, just a logo, two logos coming together, merged. How do we brand something that the world seems to own, where everyone has a voice up on, everyone has an opinion, everyone has something to say about it, everyone uses it. It's not like, if you don't fly Lufthansa, maybe you just don't have an experience with Lufthansa, but YouTube, everyone has it in its pocket. So, and we know for sure that the next billion people, next billion users, stakeholders, will come from outside America. So at some point we had to start to get in sync with YouTube. We had to start to see how does YouTube work inside. So we got on a plane, a Lufthansa, of course, and we went to YouTube in San Bruno. San Bruno is a part of San Francisco. And obviously, we watched all these YouTube videos about this famous slide. It exists. But we were very disappointed because we had to take our shoes off because of safety reasons. So we had to walk up in Socken, again, to the second floor, and it was half of the fun.
Well,
so,
technically, you weren't supposed to use the slide.
Yeah, we were not even allowed to use the slide because we were foreigners. So, the interesting thing was that then we walked around the building, we looked at everything we could get hold of, we looked at logos, we did an audit, we tried to talk to many people. And we should have started an insurance for eye cancer before we got on the job. Because this is just a little bit of the magnitude of YouTube we saw. What we saw immediately was that this play button, this button thing was everywhere. Some people were still looking for it, but it was something that was so ubiquitous and so omnipresent that we could not stumble on it. And on top of that was that we got told that there are some very important people, like the creators. Without these creators, nothing works, because they organize the traffic on the platform. If they leave the platform, all these million people go with them. So we had to give them a home, and we were told that this is actually quite important. So the thing is, as Chris just said, YouTube was facing a situation where they're becoming a business. Owned by Google, owned by Alphabet, it was a business. And how do you deal with a business when people say, actually, YouTube is a platform to make money? So we went to see these places where people make money. So we went to the YouTube spaces in New York, Los Angeles, London, Berlin. And this is the parking lot in front of the YouTube space Los Angeles. And this was the cheapest car I saw, right? This is a Mercedes Maybach. So when I saw this, I said, maybe I just picked the wrong job. I should do something else. The interesting thing is then you start to talk to people, and we did interviews. We just spoke to lots of internal employees and just audiences, and we heard a lot of stuff. For example, YouTube is a container of content, of course. YouTube is about choice and about voice. It's a bit more serious. We're a culture engine. Cat videos, I don't know if cat videos are a culture engine, but we're a culture engine, a thing that affects the rest of the world. So garage videos affect the rest of the world. And then they said, you know what, the interesting thing is that the chaotic mess of both, so the beauty of it and the chaotic mess, that's what makes YouTube interesting, what makes it attractive. And this is where we as designers started thinking, oh my God, how are we going to get out of this? Because we don't know what kind of language you talk to these people who think these kind of things. And then on top of that, people don't feel YouTube is somebody's company, it's theirs. And then you hear this, we've been successful despite ourselves. So anything you can think about, coherence, vision, structure, corporate design, everything you would expect as a kind of a platform you can work off, didn't exist. And then you have the CEO, Susan Wojcicki, saying, obviously, empower the world to create, broadcast, and share, which is true, which is the mission of YouTube. The problem was that behind her, this was the client. So we were designing for the world. And just talking to people, lots of terms came up. Free expression, democratic, personal, you, culture, subculture, universal, community, social, and so on. And from that moment onwards, we realized that this job was a bit too big for us. A bit too big. And we had to share it, so it became a shared job with them. We still got 100% of the money, but they did 50% of the job. So the thing was that
I'm not volunteering. I get paid too.
Yeah, he got paid much more than we did. But anyway, that's another story.
That's not my car.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is when you start to think about these brands that are owned by people, digital, we heard a lot about digital experience today, but you look at this, everyone has an opinion about these brands, how they work and what they do. And this leads me to talk about shared identity. And me, as Matt and myself, we both worked with Wally Olins, the guru of branding, the person that coined the word corporate identity. We were told, we read all his books. When I was a student, I bought his books. I would have never imagined that I would once work with him as a boss. and suddenly someone comes around and talks about shared identity, and we look at these things, which are real. So this is all design. People do this. People get paid to do this. This is not for free. And we have this YouTube logo going on, existing, where this guy suddenly needs to deal with it. And then we have this, which is the alter ego of it. And you go to the two different spaces of the same company, and there's just lots of money, because we can do different t-shirts, use different logos, but because there's no one who really thinks about what coherence is or what identity actually means. And the interesting thing is, the external view is exactly the same as the internal view. Normally you have a slightly different thing where you look at conventional companies, but here it was exactly the same. So that was very easy for us because at least we knew where we were. So we had to look at shared brands. What are shared brands? Social media brands, or brands that we interact with every day and we think they own partly us. And the interesting thing is, how does identity work in a shared brand context? So from a stylish anorexic symbol to black and white potato stamp art, to a corporate design system, just not the one of the company, it's just the one of Renault. So this is one and the same brand. The one and the same company. It's a business that tends to do money, that tries to do money that belongs to a big global company. Let's just look at a neighbor. This is the same logo. Same company, same problem. And they have guidelines. They didn't have guidelines. Right? So our question was, where do we start? What do we do? And is this the end of corporate design? Yeah, is this the end of design? If on the way to the canteen to get your quinoa salad, you take a red tray and put a white napkin on it, that's your logo, right? Or is this the beginning of identity? I don't know. An identity that you take to the moon and it still works, despite who you are. So this brings me to talk about shared ownership. How does shared ownership work? So talking to the YouTube people, people don't see YouTube as a business or a product, which is we're told that YouTube was a business, right? People do money with it, they earn money with it, and suddenly we were told, oh, no, it's not a business. Right? It's true. I can't even talk about that. So who owns this thing? We think it's ours, creators think it's theirs, viewers think it's theirs as well. He doesn't know either, who he needs to talk to. So the interesting thing is here, this is where our whole branding and corporate design thing stopped to work. Branded architecture, monolithic architecture, endorsed architecture. It stopped working because this mess was just too big. And then we thought, actually, people treat YouTube as a place, like a destination. And this is where our old boss comes in again, who was a guru in place branding. Destinations exist because they have a certain relevance to people, right? And this is how we came up with the idea of branding YouTube, or calling YouTube a place that encourages people to embrace their interests, interact with their communities, and help cultures to grow. Grow cultures, shared space. So in order to be able to enthuse the internal team at YouTube, us together, coming up with a kind of metaphor that would help us to make people see the importance of design, the importance of identity, and the importance of some kind of order in order to be able to get control over the situation, we came up with the idea of, why don't we look at this literally as a place? For the sake of the presentation, just New York, right? We all have been to New York, hopefully, and we kind of understand how it works. So a city is a spatial expression of a community. It's alive and it grows and so on. So if we dissect now how a destination actually works, we can see there's a center, in this case Times Square. There are attractions like monuments, like Empire State Buildings. They have communities, different people who live or coexist in this space. The Chinese, the Irish, the Germans, the Italians, and so on. And they all have different interests. And we have the neighborhoods that connect to Manhattan in this case. So these four concepts, the center, the attractions, the neighborhoods, and the communities, needed to come together through a navigation, a kind of navigation, some kind of logic that was pulling these things together, and that would give this space a sense of identity. A sense, I'm saying a sense, only a sense of identity. The same way that this is a sense of identity in London, or this is a sense of identity in Berlin, if you take away all the monuments and all the rest. And this brings us to about shared destination. So how does a shared destination actually work? With the structure for the communities, providing convergence where the focal points are. So from destination, structure, communities, and convergence, we go to a flag. A place needs a flag, right? We need streets, we need neighborhoods, we need focal points. And on top of that, the flag becomes the logo, the streets become the grid, the neighborhoods become the identities, and the focal points become the system. So this metaphor helped us to make people understand the value of design and structured thinking in order to get control over the place. And this now brings us to talk about, I'm sure you've heard the concept of minimal viable brand, which is super fashionable right now. Probably what the guy who invented YouTube did, a minimal viable brand, without knowing that he did it, actually. So we called it shared minimals. What are the shared minimals, actually? So the shared minimals are, it's this kind of schizophrenic behavior, left or right. We had to kill one. We couldn't keep both. And we looked at which of the elements are actually called assets, which of them we can actually travel with, which of them can actually go to the orbits. So we did a test, amongst many tests that we did. And obviously, there's a scalability issue at some point, and at some point, the whole thing, putting YouTube into tube doesn't make sense anymore. And normally, we give a shit on research, but in this case, we were quite happy because the research backed the opinion that actually the icon is very important.
Yeah, so, there's no working at Google without research.
Yeah, obviously,
you can't.
Data. So let's think quickly about how do we identify destinations. Matt is English. He still knows that this is his flag, despite the fact that the colors are wrong. This is still the Red Cross, even if the proportions are wrong. Even if this is correct, I still think that this has something to do with the Olympics. This is still I love New York. Because why do these things work? Because they stand for powerful idea. And this powerful idea, at the end of the day, we wrapped into the destination we called YouTube. So YouTube destination, I have to read this here because I can't. But we had a government, we designed a government for the place. So there's a population, which are the employees, the creators, the viewers, the advertisers. We have soft power, we have a financing system, we have laws, we have an infrastructure, or we have a heritage. So this was our roadmap to brand YouTube as a place and to come up with a recipe, the visual recipe, to solve the problem. And this was our brand architecture model. Have you seen the film Shrek? This is the Shrek model. So it was trying to make people see to what an extent there's a purity at the center and there's more autonomy at the outer orbits. And this helped us to see to what extent we need to combine flexibility with some kind of rigor. So being creative obviously means that you have to explore the limits. So together we said, should we just stick to this play button and say, well, we found it, we found the solution, let's keep it, let's just make it work. We said, look, we need to show the internal audiences how far we could go if we would think this as a conventional brand. So we explored the limit. So we worked on 3 identity scenarios, which is saying, don't Instagram this, please. Otherwise, he gets fired, or we have no work anymore. So we worked on 3 different approaches. One was, what happens if we take the idea of convergence, we can forget everything we have, idea of convergence, it's this movement. It's a why. And this why is just the minimal thing I need to make a system work where I have a grid system, I have typography, I have a behavior, and people will still recognize this in the context, right? Just taking away everything that is generic. Second thing was, you know what, forget about the bloody lozenge. It's old, it reminds us of television. It's just this. It's just the play button. Only this thing. It's just the forward thing. And this could live in any possible shape. Anything that goes, anything that moves, works like that. The timeline was the driving idea here. Still works. And the last one, obviously, let's preserve this. Let's make it work. Let's design a typeface. and let's just preserve the way it works today, but let's focus on one idea that works, and we look again at these 4 elements that drive the brand: flag, streets, neighborhoods, and focal points, and imagine, what's the flag? Is that the Olympics, the Red Cross, or the play button? So we came to the conclusion together, as obviously Susan Wojcicki and everyone else obviously agreed, because the risk was quite big and we cannot lose all these people and so on. So we said, let's embrace the power of the icon, tell the world it's ours, and just everything else around it to make it our flag. And what we made with it is going to be explained by Matt.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay, so I'll now take you through a little bit the result of those processes that Gabor has just explained. This is our silly YouTube page. So this is we're referring to this as this is to be continued, because this is obviously something that it keeps on evolving, keeps on changing. But what this project involved was resolving and finding these key design elements and working out a design system that could travel, that had a lateral movement to it that would allow this identity system to work for this crazy destination. So, as Gabor mentioned, we identified the flag. We have a flag for our destination. Wonderful. Of course, any flag, before you sort of say, right, this is my flag, you want to take a look at it and be sure that this is definitely right for us. So, of course, being graphic designers, we took a look at it and we realized, hang on a minute, this thing doesn't even sit in the middle of the space. This is bizarre. And this is probably one of the most well-known symbols on Earth right now, you know, probably for millennials anyway. The other really interesting thing, of course, if you fold this thing in any direction and you get the corners to line up, you discover, hang on, there's something funny going on with the corners. The corners weren't symmetrical. The actual lozenge wasn't even symmetrical. Then there was this kind of odd, kind of little shadow thing that was sitting in the middle of the arrow, and we didn't that never really made any sense to us either. When we looked at the colors all seemed to be based on print. You know, looking in the guideline, okay, yeah, there was an RGB, but it was a very print-based color. So we thought, well, this thing lives on screens. Why would you be worried about CMYK when this thing, 99% of the time, you see it on a screen? So anyway, so we set about basically redrawing it and fixing it. So we just basically built a very simple system, 4 circles that mark the radius in the corner, a new symmetry at least. You could fold this thing in the middle and at least it's symmetrical. And we gave it a new color. So at least the idea was that if anybody ever had to make this symbol themselves without the digital design assets, they could do it. So there it was, our structure for our flag. So this flag became this kind of starting point, it was the sort of the first cornerstone, let's say, of what we wanted this thing to be. So we looked at this and said, well, you know, what is it? It's something that's a call to action. It's asking you to press it. It's a symbol that makes you want to do something. And isn't that sort of really special? That's amazing that actually somehow this brand has become associated to something that looks like an action. So we wanted to try and make this thing center. We wanted to make this thing a point of convergence for this destination. So a little bit like Gabor was talking about, this idea of the city center, this point of convergence. We wanted this to work that way. So we created what we felt was a very, very, very simple system. I've just built, it comes from the arrow, but it allows culture to converge on this single point. And it doesn't matter what it is. And of course, this thing can multiply and support all sorts of cultures and personalities. And of course, what's left is essentially just a very simple grid. And this is our structure. It's a no-brainer. You've got this lozenge with a triangle, a very, very, very recognizable triangle in a red lozenge. A design system can come straight from that. So one thing is giving a structure or having this concept of an idea, a structure that can support cultures. But another thing is kind of thinking about design-wise, how are you going to ever represent these cultures? Because, of course, we can't just keep on showing lots of millions of content and people and things. So we thought there was something quite special about this arrow, as I mentioned. But, of course, it's a play button. So also, if you think about this, these are also symbols that we associate with video. But one of the thoughts was that if we think about these things, if we abstract them and think of them almost as flags, flags are the typical kind of symbol of culture. Flags have been used for millennia to indicate I exist, I'm here, this means something to me. But we wanted to sort of reinterpret flags, treat flags more as an idea. So with our system, we thought, well, what if these flags became a sort of a pattern that sort of somehow talked about the existence of culture, that culture lives here, and that culture can kind of grow in this environment, that cultures can interact. It doesn't matter how big you are, how small you are, but this is sort of large meets small. Culture lives here. So, okay, fine. So this sort of seemed like a really nice idea, where we could actually get these patterns to mean something. But then we had this idea that wouldn't it be nice, and again, this was something that came from a project that Chris was working on, about pulling color from content. So one of the ideas here was that, of course, these patterns can suddenly start to become quite personalized depending on the content. So this seemed like a really nice idea that you could pull and sample color, and that these flags would absorb these colors. And of course, the potential was that, oops, sorry, excuse me, went too fast. That, of course, perhaps in situations like this, you could actually, as you load your favicon, or you can actually, the color will automatically change, pulling the colors from your image. So this is an abstract representation of the mixing of cultures on this, in this destination, on this platform. Of course, we thought, well, of course, the thing could live even in corporate colors if necessary, and perhaps even have a tactile quality. The next thing was about building neighborhoods. Obviously, as Gabor mentioned, a city or a destination has its cultures and also its neighborhoods. So once again, we came back to our grid system and thought about this. This is not just about this destination. This is about creating these identities for these neighborhoods. And it doesn't matter what you're into. YouTube is a place where people connect around the world, so you don't actually have to live in the same location. You can find your tribe in YouTube. So, of course, there's a passion for the tribe. I think, YouTubers, when they get together, they feel connected. And, of course, gamers are no exception. So we came up with, on this same grid system, an idea for app icons, which is where these gamers connect. So they have an app where they can share videos and interact. So we did that for gaming, for kids, for music, and we created various other app icons based on this same grid system. So now this stuff started to come together. I've shared with you now the idea of this patterns as flags. We have our flag, we have our identifier. And so now these things all started to actually come together and click together as a system. So these were ideas for onboarding. So you can see how the design system starts to work. The next, say, port of call, or the next thing that we had to try and establish was this ability to navigate. And as Gabor was mentioning about in, you can identify London, or you know you're in London when you see Johnson used on buses and transport systems. You know you're in New York when you see these typefaces. So we felt as if, font and the typeface was something key in this whole identification system. And if you think about where typeface has to live within the system, within this product, it's obviously going to be key. There was an interesting insight from our friend Lady Gaga here, which we thought was quite sort of interesting, that she had this point of view about YouTube. The contributors to YouTube and the people who generate content on YouTube are incredibly powerful. And of course, some of them, such as this, superstars, have vested interest in YouTube. And her point of view was very interesting to us, that she actually thought that YouTube needed to be kept shitty.
And also key to note is that they have a direct line to our CEO. And she takes public opinion very seriously. So when she's meeting with Lady Gaga and Lady Gaga is telling her this, I get an email at like 2 in the morning.
Exactly. So one of the things also, as we kicked off this project that that we got from one of the senior management there, that this is very, very important, that YouTube has got to be imperfect. YouTube has got to be this quirky, strange, freaky place where people feel welcome. It's got to be accessible. So thinking about this, that this thing can't get, we're designers who work on all sorts of corporate work, and we had to really sort of fight ourselves to that we're not just working on another one of our corporate jobs here. This is something very strange. This is something very unique. So when we were looking at the typeface, of course, if you look at the system fonts that currently are used on YouTube, you can't say unboxing in Roboto. It doesn't look right. It doesn't look authentic. That's not unboxing. Smoky eye makeup in Noto Sans, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't feel like it has the personality that this platform needs. So we went away, and I won't take you into the depths of the type development, but essentially we developed this. So there you have it. It's a font that lives in this crazy world of mixed things, but it feels right for YouTube. It's something that's got personality, it's legible, it's got a little touch of the lozenge about it, of the symbol. This was one of the sort of starting points, was to sort of pull the angular aspects of the arrow and some of those rounded, smooth, blobby feeling that you get from the lozenge. So this was YouTube Sans. We created it in 3 weights, and it was launched first on YouTube TV, and this is the moment that Susan Wachiki, I could never say it, we proudly presented this new typeface for this new product. And we felt as if it really kind of captured the eclectic and bizarre and extremes of content that would be used on YouTube TV. Obviously, it's also something that within the interface, before they had to use the different fonts from the different TV channels, and it just looked like it was completely out of control. So at least now there was a sort of a uniformity and a coherence to the way that YouTube was talking. So this is just how the program listing looked, and this is how it looked in product UI. So that just leaves me one other thing to talk about, which is the name. So YouTube, as we've said, we've now established that our flag is our symbol. But obviously we don't need two symbols, we want one. So we thought we need a simple word mark, a name. So this is alternate Gothic, which is was the current typeface for YouTube. The thing is that this was a font that was designed in 1903 and predominantly designed for newspapers. So it kind of seems a bit strange that something that probably one of the world's biggest platforms is using a font from the 1900s. So we wanted to move away from this slightly stiff, rigid, modernist eye to an eye that felt more connected to the kind of people who are using YouTube today. This was the kind of use that this typeface was put to. But if we sort of fast forward 100 years, these idiots here are now living on YouTube and expressing themselves. So we made a slight adjustment to the typography. So we went from our alternate Gothic from 1903 to a slightly warmer, friendlier, more legible, more digital-friendly typeface.
Legible, too.
Sorry? And legible.
Yeah, at small sizes for screens, making it a little bit more legible as well. Exactly.
So it was simple. That's the YouTube logo. And I think probably most of you have now come across this new YouTube logo. It also opened the door, obviously having created this typeface, to solve the brand architecture. So now we have a very simple system. We don't have this clash between these two red lozenge shapes within our design assets. So that's probably how you've come across it in the last few months. So to wrap up a little bit coming full circle, all the way back to the flag, the streets, the neighborhoods, and the focal points, we now created a set of basic elements, a set of design elements that allowed us to express this idea of this destination, creating the streets and the neighborhoods and the focal points. So our core assets, our design system, so we now had a logo, we have a flag, we have a typeface, we have a logo typeface, app icons, and the whole lot, of course, has all been built off this grid system. So I'll just take you through now of course, where would I be without starting once again with this grid, but I'll now take you through a little bit how the design system came together. So in its simplest form, you could have a creator or an artist who is on YouTube, and they can express themselves this way. And the presence of YouTube is minimal, it's non-intrusive, but of course, we created a flexible system. So the idea is that you can, depending on how much presence the artist wants or needs, can be affected by the design system. So here we're introducing the font. You can take it a step further away from the artist and get more, you can adjust the design system. Or you could actually ignore the photo of the artist and actually just use all of the design elements to create a visual for this artist. So essentially it was about creating a flexible system that allowed you to do from the most minimum intervention to actually create communication around that artist without using any of their photography or design assets. So I'll now just take you through a little bit how this all started to work. So we have patterns and the design system working here with a creator. no imagery, just pattern, typographic solutions, various solutions here between mixing, patterns, imagery, and type. In gaming, the gaming communities, the games that people are so passionate about come through the design system like this. So this is gaming, music. And you can see here how the pattern is pulling the color from the image. You can go crazy with the font if you need to. So these were all ideas and ways of showing how this design system can evolve and move. So this is how we can speak the language of children using the same design system. So that brings me now to the end, where essentially, as Chris was saying, he started off at the beginning of Project Ringo with essentially a company that had 2 core design assets. And by the time we finished Project Ringo, we now had a much broader range of product, design assets that we could call upon. So in essence, this is how we envisaged the new YouTube identity working. So these are examples here of print, on-screen, and even corporate literature. Anything you want to add?
There's so much to add.
Oh, sorry.
No. Yeah, so basically, yeah, we're going through the end now.
Yeah.
So I think
we've overrun a bit.
We have lots of time. You know, they have nothing to do today. We have lots of time. We have 10 minutes, don't we?
I think just a few things that, you know, when I look at this for us, for YouTube, one thing I just want to always reiterate that, and it's not just for my own ego to say this, but I didn't just give a brief to an agency, hand it to them, and then go, good luck. We really, I have a team of 15 designers that are in San Bruno right now. This was a joint venture 100%, where they'd have folks in London, Madrid, Brazil, working while we were sleeping. And then we'd wake up, have a debrief meeting in the morning. They'd be exhausted. I'd be like, Matt, go to bed. And then we would then pick up a 12-hour shift, and then at the end of the day, meet, and we're just throwing out so many different ideas, so many different directions, so many different possibilities. So to us, that was a big change in the way we've both worked, the way the agency worked and the way that we worked in-house. And we finally got to a place here where we have a system that's flexible, that we can use dial up, dial down. You can use it to express gaming a certain way for a certain campaign in a certain period of time in a certain location. And we can change it up and have YouTube music displayed or in a campaign in a different way as well, but it still has this connective tissue. And again, this is brand 101, but as you saw when I joined, they didn't take that class. Everything here is executed with certain principles in mind of video first, of community, because as you saw, the initial stuff, it was a dating website. So we've been living with that as the original company, the original business model, the original design plan, and everything was sort of arbitrarily added on over time. So we really wanted to make sure that we were making considered decisions for everything, and not just doing arbitrary design for the sake of designer egos. So as we go through this, I'm just going to quickly click through some of these, but we start to see some of the stuff being used and already expressed in websites for YouTube, like external sites and stickers, and the typeface is being used. Advertising, that was sort of a transitional period when we were in the middle of doing the project, and we were like, we have a multi-million-dollar campaign, we need to get something out there. And this just shows how YouTube was just so unprepared because they had a campaign coming out and they didn't know what to do for imagery for YouTube music. And it was that was our big launch. It was a new product, a new market that we were really entering, and they just didn't know what to do with imagery or grids. So we had that stuff nailed down, but you can see there's an old app icon, the old YouTube logo. So we've always had the analogy that we were changing the tire on the car while it was still moving. Two tires at the same time, yeah. And then, all right, I'm just going to move on. But using video, looking at places too where we can have moving imagery first, whereas like when you look at like the way Google handles things, it's a lot of illustration first. And again, trying to get away from our parent company and express ourselves the most logical way for us as a brand to express ourselves, that's video first. So having billboards and things like that, making sure that we're doing advertising where we can have moving imagery when possible.
Yeah, Chris, you're going to sort of give us the excuse for why that happened.
I don't know. Look, it's a big place. There's offices in like 80 countries. There's thousands of employees. Things happen. There's no way ever that this is ever going to be, or ever, you know, the way Google operates just as a whole and YouTube, that you could launch an identity system and say, June 2nd, everything is now the new identity. It's just not physically possible. We have different launch schedules for different products. Like YouTube itself, I think, has bi-weekly updates that get pushed. I think music and gaming have different schedules, so you could update the app icon for one, and the other ones would still not be updated. And this is all code talk, which I don't know. So it's very difficult to be able to ever ship anything all at once over there. So everything's always kind of fluid and moving. And that's what we have to be doing. We have to continue to find ways to express this whole system throughout all of our products. So we want to do this. Okay, so mine, I didn't know this. I'm 41. Don't think I've handed out a business card in my entire career. And yeah, they were really important. We've designed like 60 different business cards before we landed on a business card design. It was really ridiculous. And for those of you that are students that may not have heard this yet, those of you who are in the industry and have been here for a while, make the logo fucking bigger. That's always a thing, and that will never die.
This was another learning from this. It was very, very, very interesting. Our collaboration is, this for us, I think certainly for the two teams, was a fantastic learning, and I think very unique. I don't think that's something that would ever, I think it would be very rare that you would have a situation where on the client side, there's a design team that is completely mirroring our design team in Saffron, and we absolutely had to co-create together, co-create in the truest sense. We were connected almost 24/7. We were working 24/7. We were, when we finished working, those guys picked up the work and carried on in San Francisco. And then when we got up in the morning, they would have sent everything through to us. So we just kept this thing going through the whole process. And I think it was a fantastic learning process for both parties.
Yeah, and I have one too. Don't take this too serious, okay? The end of design can be the beginning of identity. Just because everything we have learned in branding and corporate design is being disrupted by dynamics that we can't control, and this requires a very flexible mindset from our side. This is the wrap-up of the whole job. Thank you.